And now coming into the penultimate corner and now coming onto the banking, he is going to be the first driver to set a lap. But now as he comes onto the start finish straight, DRS is not enabled in the wet, while he comes across the line and he sets a 112.4. So I thought a 113 would have been a good lap, but Dungeon straight into the 112s as Jerry coming across the line as well, and Jerry goes to P2 with a 113.1. So Dungeon, 6/10 gap to P2, he's looking very comfortable in these conditions at the moment. Heya now coming across the line onto the start finish straight, the championship leader. This is going to be important for him as he comes across the line and it's going to be a 111.9. Wow, 5/10 ahead of his teammate. And Heya, he is in a completely different league right now. As you see him, he's got 2 purple sector and a yellow sector 1, so he could have gone even faster. Oh, Moto, I have no idea how Moto managed to do that. I think he's stuck on something. The car just keeps flipping over, but it keeps resetting him in the wrong position. But he must have flipped coming into the pit entry, and that's how he got stuck. But old Moto, and he's finally managed to get unstuck. Oh yeah, that's a very weird incident. Steve now coming through the penultimate corner. He is replacing Wisei for this race, so that is going to make the championship battle a bit easier for Heya. All Heya needs to do is get P5 in the race, but Steve now coming across the line sets a 112.9, so he lives up to Wisei standards and goes up into P3. Heya now on another lap attempt. He has a purple first sector and a yellow second sector, but it's still looking like a very good lap so far as we go on board with him coming onto the start finish straight. What is it going to be? It's going to be a 111.4, so that's an incredible lap, almost an entire second ahead of P2. And Heya is looking absolutely unstoppable in these conditions. I don't think there's anybody that's going to get anywhere close to him. Now into the final sector we go, Speed slipping and sliding through the chicane there, but he uses all the track on the exit, but he's hard to get the power down as he now coming into the penultimate corner, being careful not to go too wide into the gravel there. But now as we go through the final corner and now onto the start finish straight, Speed, he keeps it on the right hand side, but what is it going to be? It's going to be a 113.3, so that is an improvement in time but not in position. But so far this is looking like a very strong session for the Saubers. Now we're on board with Nora coming into the final sector, and Nora having a bit of wheel spin coming out of the chicane, correcting the car a bit, but into the penultimate corner, Nora actually using the grass on the entry there, so taking a bit of a different approach to that corner compared to the other drivers. But now onto the start finish straight, what is it going to be? It's going to be a P3 with a 112.9, so Nora slots in just ahead of Steve, but that's a very good lap by the Russian driver. So that is the starting grid for the Dutch Grand Prix, a 3rd pole position in a row for Heya. And he's completely dominated this session, almost an entire second ahead of the next closest driver. But anything can happen here in Zandvoort, but it's looking very likely Heya can win the championship here. And it's 5 lights out, and away we go here for the Dutch Grand Prix. Dungeon getting a good start, moving ahead of his teammate coming into turn 1. But Heya looked around the outside and he's able to retake the lead coming out of the first corner. But as we make our way through turn 2 and now we're into turn 3, they are still side by side with each other. But Heya, he's able to get the power down much better than Dungeon. And Heya has created quite a big gap to Dungeon on the exit there. But as we look further back, Nora has lost P3 to Steve as Nora hits the bump and goes into the gravel, but he keeps it out of the wall and luckily doesn't get any damage from that. But Heya extending his lead over Dungeon as Dungeon goes over the sausage curb and he just goes into the wall as well, and that's going to be a very big mistake for him and Nora. But now Steve is battling with Jerry for P2, and Moto has made up several positions as well, looking to get into this battle. But as we come into the final sector, he has now made a 2-second gap to Steve in the Ferrari there, and Steve could be looking at losing yet another position as Jerry, he's able to get the much better traction coming out of the penultimate corner. And as we go onto the banking and onto the start finish straight, Jerry has moved ahead of Steve, so it's Heya leading ahead of Jerry, followed closely by Steve. And now it's a 3-way battle for P6. Just Maxi leading the way ahead of, oh, that's an Aston Martin going into the wall, and that's Baby Shumi. Baby Shumi luckily not losing his front wing there. Well, that corner just seems to be very tricky, catching out 2 drivers already in this race. Dungeon trying to make his way back through the field after his crash on the first lap, but he is now hunting down Moto very quickly as we come into the penultimate corner. But Dungeon, oh, that's a very big cut, and that's going to be a track limit penalty for Dungeon, as we see Dungeon going into the gravel, struggling to slow the car down, but that's going to put Dungeon back down into P6, but we still have a battle for P2. Steve in very close proximity to Jerry. Steve is just waiting for the mistake to happen, but Jerry for the time being keeping everything under control. And now coming into turn 1, Dungeon looking to get the move done on Steve for P4, but it's not going to work out for him just yet, and we're going to come into the banked corner of turn 3, but Steve taking a very tight line through there, and that's going to compromise him on the exit as you see him getting a bit of a wiggle there, struggling to get the power down, but that's going to allow Dungeon to get the move done and move up to P4. Steve, he hits the bump and he goes into the wall as well, and that's the 3rd driver I've seen so far, but he didn't get any damage, and that's a Haas, and that's Nura. He goes into the wall as well, and he's actually lost his rear wheel there, so that's going to be Nura out of this race for good. And oh, that's Maxi in the V-carb. He is now out of this race as well, so we have yet another victim of that corner. And Speed is out as well, so in 2 laps time we have 2 drivers crashing out in the exact same spot. So that's Speed, his first race back in AWC after a while, ending in a DNF. Moto has dropped down into P4, so Dungeon has got the overtake done, but Dungeon now going to be setting his sights on Jerry in P2, but Moto, and oh, that's a massive crash, and Moto losing both of his front wheels, and that's going to be him now out of the race. But this race just seems to be going downhill for Ferrari. First they had Whiteside not attending this race, and now it's Moto crashing out. But this one race could end up costing them both of the championships. It's been 3 pole positions in a row, 3 fastest laps in a row, and it's now going to be 3 race wins in a row here in Zandvoort. Heyer makes it yet another Grand Slam here at the Dutch Grand Prix, and he is the Season 3 Drivers' Champion. Heyer's late season form has been absolutely unstoppable, and the only driver able to compete with him was this man here, Dungeon. But this race, Heyer had no competition. But nonetheless, Dungeon, he's gonna come home in P2 with a 32-second gap to his teammate. But this is gonna be the 3rd Mercedes 1-2 of the season, and that's gonna be very important in the battle for the Constructors' Championship, as Mercedes are now only 6 points behind Ferrari. But Jerry, he rounds out the podium in P3. A dominant victory for Heyer, and a very chaotic race here at Zandvoort, with only 7 drivers finishing the race. But Heyer is now the Season 3 Drivers' Champion, but in the Constructors' Championship, Mercedes are only 6 points behind Ferrari, so it's winner takes all at the final round in Japan.